This is Power 98.7. And now you're listening to Power Talk with Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, 9 a.m. to midday, taking your calls on 0861 987 000.
Welcome back, Bantwana Benkosi, Bantwana Bahle, Bantwana Bekas. We're going to turn now to unpacking this tariff situation, which by all estimations is going to wreak havoc in South Africa. Jobs, industries, businesses. And I'm joined on the line by Senior Economist, trade and industry policy strategist, Nokwanda Maseko. Unjani Nokwanda, Nox.
Yeah, Pila, Dr. Ndlozi, how are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for creating time to be with us here on Power Talk.
Sure.
And an international relations specialist, Thembisa Fakute. Welcome to Power Talk.
Thanks for having me.
And let me start with you, Thembisa. There's just a description for us of this international trade situation that Trump seems to be holding to his guns. And he seems also to be now escalating through tariffs, disagreements around Palestine, punishing some of America's best allies. What's going on?
Well, Trump is insistent on his hammer foreign policy strategy, as Maslow's psychological assessment tends to suggest. He goes around with a hammer, and everything to him is a nail which needs to be hit. So he can't really be flexible in terms of applying other ways of international relations and furthering the American foreign policy. But I think we also are to be blamed because we seem to be entertaining this very schizophrenic political advances that he continues to perpetuate. Right now, for example, the whole world is talking about tariffs, but we don't even know what it's going to do. I'm of the view that it might just renegade to, kick the can down the road as it's done in the past. Mm-hmm. We still don't know what's going on, and today is the first. So you're likely to have another postponement, as it's been the case. So the world is also entertaining this and creating, as far as I'm concerned, unnecessary stability to a man who has not been clear. He changes and flip-flops on a daily basis. So we have to be grow up. We have to grow up in terms of how we deal with Trump, like many other countries have done. But I'm of the view that it's not going to be 30%. It's either going to be a postponement or there's going to be a further negotiations, because it's not only South Africa that needs the United States. United States also need us. We've got very critical imports and exports that we have in this country, which are essential to the United States. So it's not going to be just a willy-nilly, clumsy imposition of this 30%. And I'm sure the United States are also having this discussion.
Sis Nokwanda, I don't know, how many business interests does the United States actually have in South Africa?
Excuse me. I cannot give you the exact number, but if you think about the automotive industry, for example, they've got an American company operating here. So if you think of Ford, they've got parts manufacturing happening in South Africa. They do certainly have, businesses in the financial sector. But I think it's more than just a sort of number of businesses, or, I think we need to think more broadly about the actual state of the economy and what is happening here. And I do agree with the previous speaker that this is actually quite a distraction. We're not getting to a point where we're discussing what we can do as a country in terms of looking for other markets. What we're doing was we're letting the U.S. administration disrupt us. And at this point, I'm not even sure what it is they want from the negotiations. I I'm not sure if they know what they want from the negotiations, which is probably why they did not respond to, the last round that was submitted by the Department of Trade and Industry. And so even going forward, I'm not sure if we're going to get anything that's sensible. I don't think they know what they want. And, to appropriate Toni Morrison, I think the function of this administration at this point is to keep us distracted. And I am hoping that as a country, we start moving towards some important things like finding alternative markets. I was listening to the news segment and, they were talking about the fruit industry. There are other markets for South African fruit. In 2024, the U.S. was not even the top export destination for South African fruit. It was the Netherlands. And so there are other markets that we could be looking to, but I think we've let the U.S. sort of bully us around since the agreement on AGOA and now with these new tariffs. I think it's time to take this differently.
This idea of new markets, let's unpack it for a bit. The United States represents a significant buying power in the global economy. Literally, they've got not just investments and all of that. Some of the best consumerists or consumers in the global economy are Americans. And they are very spendthrift. They spend a lot. Even GDP per capita, if you're thinking about the Chinese, for an example, they don't have the same buying power, the average China citizen or Chinese, on the one hand. On the other, you are, it seems to me, going to meet the same problems of reciprocity. You're going to have to, it's not something that you can negotiate overnight. There are problems in a sense of you still have to negotiate with those markets for proper deals. Are you able to unpack, this question of leave the United States, go look for other markets on the one hand, on the other, maybe do both, and maybe the DTIC is doing both?
Yeah, sure. I do think that the DTIC is trying to do both. But in terms of the markets, there's always scope to explore new markets. And I take your point into consideration that, the U.S. has the biggest consumer base in the world. But some of what they're consuming, they do not produce locally. They're making it, they're having it come in from countries such as China, such as Taiwan. There is, as we would have seen during the pandemic in 2020, 2021, there's a very big linkage across the global economy. And so if one country is struggling, we all struggle. But this notion of, looking for new markets, for me, what it says is, this could actually allow us to negotiate terms that might be better for this country. So if you're looking at our critical minerals, for example, we find a country where we can say, okay, we've got these minerals, help us beneficiate them. You will have access to them, but then we want to beneficiate them locally and make sure that we're also building a local industry. I don't think we are able to have that conversation right now with this Trump administration. And so I think take what we have, and they will need these minerals. The U.S. will need these minerals. We have about 80% of the world's platinum. They will need this. And so I think, if we do decide, let's find an alternative market for our fruit, let's find an alternative market for, our platinum reserves, that could possibly then give us a leverage to say, hey, we want tech transfer, we want to create jobs locally, we will give you access to the things that we're producing, but we also want this particular thing. Whereas at this point, it seems as though every time South Africa sneezes in terms of, hey, this is our foreign policy stance, the U.S. comes back and says, actually, we don't want you to do that, so we'll take away AGOA, or we will put in higher tariffs and stuff like that. And so I think it's very difficult to negotiate when you don't have the kind of power that the U.S. has if you are South Africa. And so I think we could possibly find that power if we look into new markets and use what we have to negotiate better terms.
Mr. Fakuta, the disruption of Trump is in essence the disruption of the international trade systems, the international cooperation, but particularly, trade routes. They've got a lot of military power over trade. They could disrupt even at that level. But for now, to coordinate an international system around tariffs, around trade in general, part of what this means is precisely that they've disrupted that. So they've got the power to also punish you if you leave the negotiation table. Maybe you say Netherlands, they say, okay, then plus 100%, which makes your life even harder because Netherlands also needs the United States.
Yes, but I think also we need to look at this as an opportunity for us, because it's an opportunity for us to rightfully look for alternative markets. And that's what I think DTIC and the government of South Africa are currently doing. Second is also a time for us to also look at how we can use those countries that have got lower tariffs to trade with indirectly to the United States and apply the laws of origin. For example, you had the EU imposing tariffs on the EVs from China, and China decided to, at the moment, busy establishing themselves in Morocco, and Morocco is closer to Europe, and they're going to be exporting from Morocco and then apply the laws of origin. In other words, exports of China will be the exports of Morocco, even though brands are Chinese, as we are currently doing the BMW, Ford, and other international brands. So those are options that we have. And I think at the moment there is rationale and a convincing argument that we should do that. And the United States perhaps will likely to do so. I'm not quite sure whether they'll still do.
But is the international community in a position to isolate the U.S. from a trade perspective? Is it really a viable option? I mean, China, with its magnanimity, its largest business partner is still the United States, trading partner.
Well, I think we are witnessing history. This is likely to come back to bite the United States in the long run. This is the beginning of the end of U.S. market or global domination. Because what you have just witnessed, basically the United States has played into the hands of China. China is hungry, it's consuming, and it's willing to absorb and buy whatever it is that we have. I remember earlier on, DTIC basically was saying we already have a market in China. Yes, we do have a large agricultural export to the United States, but China is ready to take that. In fact, there's so many other agricultural products that could easily, in a matter of days, be diverted to China, and we might not even feel the pinch. In fact, we might actually enable some of our producers to make more money because there won't be that much tariffs. Or tariffs have been, by the way, scrapped between China and African countries. So it's free, zero tariff export market. So those are the kind of things that we need to start looking at. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we must not continue our negotiations and discussions with the United States. We would like to see improved relations. You know that the United States has got an axe to grind with us for various reasons, including ill-informed consultations they've been having with some of the non-governmental organizations in this country, the influence of Elon Musk and our ICJ court case against Israel. So we have to continue with these discussions in terms of trying to improve our relationship and communicate to them that they must separate politics from business. And I think that's what the DAC, led by Minister Parkstau, will continue doing. But we cannot compromise on certain things when it comes to matters of international relations, whilst at the same time, I think we should take advantage of this situation by looking for alternative markets.
Sis Nokwanda, is this a viable option? I mean, so let's if these free market relations, free trade agreements were in any way to the advantage of South Africa in relation to China, how come there haven't been a priority? Why has the US always been a priority? There's something that doesn't make sense there.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is historical, isn't it? It's easier to maintain the relationships that you already have than to build new ones. And we've seen over the years with, the increasing trade relations with China that we are building that relationship. We've seen it even in the shift in trade. I mean, I know we're having a conversation about the U.S., but the truth is the U.S. has not been our biggest trade partner in rand value in quite a long time. China has been at the top in terms of where we are exporting our products. Yes, it's still largely minerals, but quite a lot of it is going to China. There is some of it going to the U.S., obviously. But the point is that we have been building these relationships, not just with China, but with other countries as well. And I think with globalization, I mean, you have to maintain relationships with different countries because whatever is needed for production is coming from different parts of the world. That's just the nature of global value chains at this point. And so I think the U.S. itself is not so much, if you were to think of it as a monopoly in terms of trade partners, it's not that monopoly anymore. It's not the only country that's out there that's got trade relations with South Africa. And I think the more the relations continue in this very very confusing way. I think it's making the case more and more that South Africa actually needs to explore other alternatives. I mean, we've just come from the TIPS Forum now looking at how to industrialize using the AFCFTA. So that also says we are actually at a point where we're exploring African markets more seriously. Yes, there's still some challenges there, but there's definitely scope to use the AFCFTA to make this continent, a very big player in terms of the global economy. But that's going to require some work from the part of South Africa, from the part of countries within the continent. And so, to answer your question, it's not to say that, China's the only alternative or one other country is the only alternative. It's just it will take time to build these relationships, given the fact of how deeply the U.S. has been entrenched in our trade environment, also in terms of our local economy. But, we have seen some of their companies obviously moving out. Ford, for example, over the past few years has taken out some of their production. But, it's a wait and see, but also it's a wait and find other markets, see where we can grow our own production, where we can grow our own exports, and in terms of value-added exports, not just minerals whose value fluctuates whenever there's a crisis or whatever.
But it might be true maybe with regards to food, but certainly something like the auto industry in South Africa producing some of the most expensive cars, to be honest. The Chinese cars are many. They've got a solid industry. What could be an alternative destination for BMW, Mercedes, Benz cars, upon which those thousands and thousands of jobs depend? What could Treasury do there, firstly, to insulate them from shutting down? And what is the market from the United States to where?
That is a slightly maybe challenging one, just on the nature of the fact that what we think of as auto exports going to the U.S. from South Africa, that's in part, the BMW. I can't remember if it's the X2 or the X3. So it's not like a big range of vehicles that are going to the U.S. Yes, it's an important part of export revenue, but it's a very particular model. And so do we find an alternative market? We could probably get those back to Germany. I mean, I don't think we have a big enough market locally to be able to cover that consumption. Could go back to Germany. We could have them going to other countries. It is going to be a difficult one, and I think probably there's scope there to maybe say, hey, actually, what is happening here? But there's also then the issue of, rules of origins. How can we use those to make sure that that industry is protected? But, more broadly, I think we are seeing changes, once again, even in the auto environment, especially now with the advent of, electric vehicles. There's going to be a shift anyway in the industry. And so when we think about what happens with the U.S., I think we can't just be thinking in terms of this version of cars that we have now. We have to be thinking of alternative markets in terms of where then do we ship our cars once we start manufacturing electric vehicles, and in terms of the ones that we have now, given that they're still internal combustion engines, where can we find alternative markets while we fix our production line so that we're able to cater for EVs. But again, that requires us to think from a point of, not from a point of panic, but from a point where we have decided, okay, this is the actual route that we are taking, rather than panicking, because right now we are panicking.
Okay. Final question to you, Mr. Fagude, relates to, do you think, or how do you rate, can Trump sustain a hostile trade relationship with Canada? That's essentially their immediate largest trading partner.
I don't think he can. And he's dealing with a very astute politician at the moment, a man who stands his ground. And Trump understands that. But again, it's Trump's character to deal and respect those that stand up against him or stand up to oppose whatever it is that he seeks to oppose on them. And this is the situation with Canada. And the proximity to the Canadians, by the way, Americans and Canadians, notwithstanding that, of course, they've got Canada's got two languages and America's got one, they culturally share same things. And their politics are also the same. And it's one of the greatest allies, not only in terms of trade, but also politically. They have no choice but to look at each other's backs and protect each other's backs when it comes to external hostility or threats. So Trump has got no choice but to continue engaging with the Canadians, and I don't think he can sustain the standalone foreign policy when it comes to dealing not only with Canada but with the rest of the world, because of the shared landmass, they've got no choice but to also share the military preparedness and capabilities when it comes to external threats, etc. They share two oceans together, which is Pacific and Atlantic. So they share a bit together, and they will be forced, because of that geographical proximity, to continue engaging with each other.
This is Nokwanda Maseko and Tembisa Fagude. Thanks to you both for creating time to speak to us here on Power Talk.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
It's 10:30, Bantwana Benkosi. We're going to take the headlines with Nhlanhla Sihume.